Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, folks, Big Paul here with another anabolic Q&A. I got some good questions lined up today. We're going to talk about estradiol levels, what's an optimal range. We are going to talk about myofibrillar hypertrophy versus sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. We're going to talk about Equipoise crushing your estrogen levels, and we got many other questions. Folks, these questions mostly come from my school members community. It's the Anabolic Bodybuilding, Team Anabolic Bodybuilding members community that you can find on School, SKOOL. We have a great group of people over there. Now, it is super cheap. It's only $30 a month. It's your opportunity to ask me questions. If you just have quick one-off questions, you're not interested in coaching, you just want to have access to some of the resources that I have available. I have some mini courses over there. I have a thing on how to build cycles. I have some stuff over there on peptides and insulin and other stuff over there. Carb cycling, there's a few little mini courses that are in there as well. And a message board where the members communicate with each other. I think we're up to about 100 members right now. So we have a nice little community of people that chat with each other on the message board. And I do check it daily and answer questions here and there. And the questions for these Q&As come from the members community. Members get top priority for questions. All right, enough of that. Let's dig into these questions in just 1 second. All right, first question I have here is from Jason Hollis. He is a member of the Team Anabolic Bodybuilding School members community. Jason asks, just got my blood work back and my estradiol was 18. I'm currently running 250 milligrams of testosterone cypionate once weekly. Previously, I was on 400 milligrams of test cyp weekly, and my estradiol was 38. I'm not taking any estrogen management medication. Does this mean I am a really low converter, or is this something to worry about? 18 is considered within range. Keep in mind that estradiol levels are transient. Everybody converts estrogen at a different level. As you get leaner, your estradiol conversion goes down because aromatase is manufactured or made in the fat tissue, in adipose tissue in the male body. So the leaner you get, the less estrogen conversion you have. Depending on the test that you look at, typically 10 to 40 is a normal range of estradiol for a man, if I recall correctly. I've seen most tests are 10 to 40. I've seen them go up to 50. I've seen a few that were 20. But what I find, and this is just my anecdote, and it depends on the person, usually when you get below 20, you kind of start feeling cruddy. Your joints start to hurt. Your sex drive goes to shit. You start feeling lethargic and tired and run down all the time. Now, that's not the case for everybody, and I would let symptoms dictate this. Also, what I have seen is when estradiol gets very low, HDL also gets smashed. Estradiol, when it's up, HDL tends to be higher. Estrogen has an effect on lipid metabolism as well, positive effect. So I like to try to keep, in my off season, I like to keep my estradiol at the higher end of the normal range, maybe even slightly above normal. That way I can, optimize my lipids. There's also some neurocognitive effects and benefits from having estrogen a little bit higher, cardiovascular protective, kidney protective. Now, there is this belief amongst some of these weirdo TRT docs, some of the people out there that, having your estradiol level, it's that of an ovulating woman is going to be somehow beneficial, that supraphysiological levels is beneficial. There is zero evidence to that. Estradiol is a sexually dimorphic hormone, and there doesn't seem to be any benefit in men to run it at supraphysiological levels. And not to mention, it seems to have negative effects. When it gets high, you'll notice that your mood starts to get bad. I usually get depression, anxiety. I wouldn't say depression, but just anxiety, and I feel kind of down. Panic attacks, things like that start to happen. Erectile dysfunction, water retention. These are some of the issues and side effects that you'll see with high estradiol levels. So I would say you want to live somewhere in that 20 to 40, 20 to 50 range is ideal. For me, I notice like when I get above 60, I start feeling side effects. I start having erectile dysfunction and water retention. When I get below 20, I start feeling run down. My joints hurt. I kind of feel cruddy. So somewhere in that sweet spot is where I like to live. Now, how you get in there, if you notice that your estrogen is not in range that you like it to be, how you feel, based on how you feel, you can run more testosterone. That's going to cause more estradiol conversion, and that in turn is going to raise your estrogen levels. If you do not want to take more testosterone, you could simply run some HCG. That should bring up your estradiol levels. You could get fatter. That would work. If you get into a situation where you've completely smashed your estrogen, which has happened to me before, you can run a low-dose D-ball to kind of help with that short term, but that wouldn't be a long-term solution. Long-term, we would want to get estrogen back up. Nandrolone seems to increase aromatase expression as well, so that's another small dose of nandrolone with your testosterone could potentially raise estradiol levels, but nandrolone sometimes comes with its own set of problems, so that may not be an ideal solution. But these are some options that you do have. All right, next question here is from Paul Robinson. Paul asks, hydration and electrolytes on cuts. What would be your general guidance for the total water and electrolyte consumption per day on a cuts? And what would it be any different in a building phase? I find that you need more hydration on a cuts. This is generally what I've seen. There are some primary benefits, and then there's some physiological benefits, I should say, and some psychological benefits. One, just drinking a ton of water keeps you full and helps with food noise. Having adequate water is important for lipolysis, the breakdown of fat. The first step in lipolysis is hydrolysis, and if there's not enough water present, you cannot initiate lipolysis or it will be severely limited. So it can actually hinder fat burning not having enough water present. So I get a lot of these dunderheads that will cut water because they see the weight go down and they're like, wow, man, I dropped 2 pounds since yesterday. You didn't burn 2 pounds of fat. That's for sure. This is why getting focused on the scale sometimes can get you in trouble. These guys start obsessing over the weight and they see these big weight drops and they think it's fat. That's not how fat burning works. It's usually slow. Slow and arduous, like 1 to 2 pounds per week is probably the max that you're going to see on fat loss. So, obsessing over the scale is probably a bad way to evaluate this stuff. But keep in mind that water is required for lipolysis. Also, water is important for flushing out toxins. If you are slamming the clenbuterol, the SLU, PP332, the retatrutide, the methylene blue, all these other fat burners, over-the-counter supplements, doing a shit ton of cardio, and you're probably going to be getting dehydrated some from doing the cardio, that is also going to increase your hydration requirements. Generally, like sort of my rule of thumb is 60% of your weight in ounces. And it could be more than that for a small woman. But I would say generally, the general rule of thumb, like bare minimum is 4 liters of water per day. I really like to see my guys getting somewhere, it's about a gallon. 4 liters is about a gallon. It's 30 some ounces in a liter. I don't remember exactly, 31, 32, something like that. About a gallon of water per day is sort of the bare minimum. As we move towards the end of contest prep, we'll crank that up, sometimes as high as 6 to 7 liters of water per day. Now, as far as sodium requirements go, it's usually about 600 milligrams per liter of water. From what I've seen, most people overdo the sodium. And you end up in a situation where you have a bunch of water retention and blood pressure goes through the roof. Now, when you are sweating, if you have a physical job, if you're out in the sun all day long, if you're sitting in the sauna, your sodium requirements are going to increase. What I see is most people over consume sodium and under consume potassium. If memory serves me correctly, the proper ratio of potassium to sodium is 3:2, so you need 3 parts potassium, 2 parts sodium. Under advice from Dr. Dean, it's a trick that I learned from Dr. Dean St. Mart, is to use light salt from Morton's. Light salt from Morton's has the perfect ratio of potassium and sodium already in it. It's already portioned out, so all you have to do is just salt your food with that. It also contains chloride, which a lot of guys are deficient with chloride. You see the blood work, and when you're drinking a bunch of water, you're going to flush out electrolytes. Sodium follows water. The more water you drink, the more sodium you're going to flush, so you need to increase sodium intake. You also see guys that are deficient in chloride on their contest preps as well. I occasionally will see guys that are hyponatremic. I've had that happen to me before, where I have flushed out too much sodium and created an electrolyte imbalance. Also, keep in mind, if you're using an ARB like telmisartan, that is going to cause additional potassium retention. And sometimes guys are using telmisartan has a little bit of hydrochlorothiazide, which is going to increase sodium excretion. So in that situation, that skews the formula of potassium to sodium ratio. I think most people are using a magnesium now. It used to be that a lot of guys were deficient in magnesium. You need magnesium glycinate. That's the one that's not going to make you shit your pants. I take 500 milligrams a day. That seems to be plenty. Calcium is another important mineral that people often are deficient in, men, because they don't eat any dairy products, especially bodybuilders, and they don't take a calcium supplement. Now, if you're taking calcium, you need to make sure you're taking vitamin D and K2 with it for proper calcium metabolism. You need to make sure that there's K2 with that, and vitamin D as well. Calcium somewhere around 1,000 milligrams per day, from my understanding and recollection. That's what you need for calcium. So really, the essential ones are potassium, sodium, and magnesium. And you get a lot of these ding-dongs that are using a shit ton of sea salt. They think pink Himalayan sea salt has some magic formula to it that's going to make them healthier. And I see dudes all the time that end up iodine deficient because they don't use iodized salts, and they end up having thyroid downregulation. So if you are using sea salt, you probably need to supplement in some iodine. The easy solution would be to just use some regular old sodium chloride table salt, or use the light salt that I mentioned that already has potassium in it, and then you can just eat a Greek yogurt. That's what I do daily for your calcium, and take a magnesium pill before bed. Also keep in mind, if you're carb cycling, that sodium intake and water intake is going to need to be higher on the high carbohydrate days, because both water and sodium are important for glycogen synthesis. Sodium is important for glucose to enter the bloodstream from the gut. It is the SLG21 transporter that's going to be responsible for that. So you do need some sodium in your high carbohydrate day. You're going to need an increased amount of sodium. You're also going to need more water. Sodium also facilitates the sodium-potassium pump and allows glucose to enter the cells as well, supporting electromagnetic gradient. I forget. It's been a long time since I've taken chemistry in college, in physiology and biology and all that shit. It's been 30 years, but the sodium-potassium pump is very vital. Like I said, once again, most guys are deficient in potassium and have way too much sodium. But if you're sweating, if you're drinking a ton of water, salt follows water. Wherever water goes, salt goes, and vice versa. And you also need a proper balance of sodium and potassium to facilitate the sodium-potassium pump, so glucose is properly absorbed and cellular hydration happens. All right, next question I've got here is from Chris Castro. Chris is a member of the Team Anabolic Bodybuilding website. Chris asks, how does one know when to lower or raise EQ levels based on estrogen levels? With it being such a long ester, doesn't it make it hard to adjust based on your low E2, or is there anything you can do to ensure more stable levels? Well, that is the downside of Equipoise. I don't recall the exact half-life, and keep in mind these things aren't precise, but it's something like 12 to 15 days. It takes 5 half-lives for the drug to completely eliminate or to be considered to be eliminated. So let's assume that it is 12 days. That's 2 months, 60 days for the EQ to completely reduce. That is the downside of EQ. And I have crushed my estrogen with E2 before, or with Equipoise before, and it is miserable, and you have to wait it out. Now, there are some quick fixes, as I mentioned in the previous answer. You could just run some D-ball, low-dose D-ball, 20, 30 milligrams. That D-ball converts to methyl estradiol, which is a very potent form of estrogen that can fix the problem temporarily. You could also just increase your testosterone. That would be a way to get aromatase conversion expression up so you have more estrogen conversion, that would be a potential answer as well. HCG would be another thing that you could throw in the mix that could get the estrogen up. Now that I am older, I don't know that I want to run Equipoise again. I tend to be a lower estrogen converter than I was when I was younger. I had a period post-show this year where my estrogen was completely fucking crushed for like 6 months. I couldn't get it out of the single digits, and it was terrible. I ended up, I swore I was never going to take D-ball again. I'm not a huge D-ball fan. It's the bro's choice for steroids. It's the worst steroid for giving you gyno, water retention, puffy ankles, red face, and acne that there is. But in this situation, D-ball was a lifesaver. Immediately I noticed the difference when I ran. I think it was just running 20 milligrams, maybe 30. I don't recall exactly what it was. It was a small dose that I used to pull myself out of the gutter, and I felt better immediately. All right, Ed Portranco is a coaching client of mine and also a member of the Team Anabolic Bodybuilding School member site. And Ed asks, what is the difference between sarcoplasmic and myofibrillar hypertrophy, and how does one best capitalize on both of them? Quite simply put, the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, sarcoplasmic, it's just the stuff that's around the muscle cells. It's going to be glycogen, energy substrates, fluid, all the other things that are around the muscle cell, nutrients, etc. They aren't actually contractile tissue. It's just there feeding that tissue. Now, there are some people that say that you're wasting your time trying to facilitate sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Myofibrillar hypertrophy, on the other hand, is the actual growth of the muscle fibers themselves. So think of the muscle fiber as a rope, and you're adding more fibers, more strings to that rope to make it denser. That is myofibrillar hypertrophy. Now, we also have hyperplasia. That typically does not happen in adults unless you're running a shit ton of growth hormone, your IGF-1 levels are through the roof. Then that is potentially true. So really, in most people, the only growth that you're going to get is the myofibrillar growth, where the actual muscle fiber itself expands in size. Sarcoplasmic growth can be, as you have more myofibers and larger myofibers, the amount of substrate that's there to feed those can be quite considerable. Now, I hear a lot of people that say that it's a waste of time, that there really is no sarcoplasmic growth. And while that is technically true, the other stuff does count. We think about a bodybuilder going into a show, peaking for a show, we always hear about full and flat. Peaking for a show, you're not growing myofibers going into that peak week. What you're growing, or what the expanded size is going to be, is the sarcoplasm, all that other stuff that's there. And a very large bodybuilder can synthesize quite a considerable amount of glycogen. And we talk about studies, and everybody says that there's really not significant growth from sarcoplasmic, pushing the sarcoplasm. But if you're a large bodybuilder, a guy like me, I can eat 2,000 grams of carbs on a high day without gaining any fat. Now, not all of that is being synthesized into glycogen. Let's just say half of it, which is probably conservative, is synthesized into glycogen. So we have 1,000 grams of carbohydrates that are synthesized into glycogen, and it's going to take 3 to 4 parts water. Also, that's going to be pulled into the sarcoplasm with that as well. So we're talking about 4,000 grams of stuff. That is 8 fucking pounds. Now, while this is not real contractile tissue, I get that argument. Who do you think is going to look better on stage? The guy who sucked in 8 more pounds of stuff into the body of the muscle, or the dude that is flat and is completely depleted and completely glycogen depleted? You can see it on stage. You take a look at the keto guy or the carnivore guy that gets on stage, they are never filled out. The dude that's slamming carbs, taking insulin, drinking a bunch of water, using salt, all that stuff, they're the ones that look big, full, and bubbly on stage. I also speculate, now you'll see it in post-show, with the post-show rebound, guys will gain 30, 40 pounds sometimes in a 6 to 8 week period of time, and they don't get fat. Now, is that all myofibrillar structures? Probably not. It's very doubtful that you're putting on that much. You're putting on that much myofibrillar, real contractile tissue substance in that amount of time. But what is happening is there does seem to be some sort of supercompensation that happens with the sarcoplasm. And this is just my speculation. This is me totally blasting my mouth, bro science. I know all the hypertrophy experts are probably going to shit their pants when I say this. That shit is real, man. I've experienced it. I've seen it with my clients a million fucking times. And it does seem to lay the groundwork or facilitate the ability to grow new myofibrillar structures over the long term. So that rebound that you have, and you'll see it, guys will put on that 30 pounds, 20, 30 pounds, whatever post-show, if they structure their diet correctly. They don't eat like assholes. They push a bunch of carbs, sometimes use insulin, HGH, their IGF-1 is through the roof. I feel like you're laying the framework down for a productive off-season. And then when you get into the off-season, that's when you start laying down the myofibers and potentially have hyperplasia that happens, potentially. That's another thing you'll hear from the science nerds, is that the hyperplasia doesn't happen in adults. Yeah, the studies that they're doing, those guys aren't taking 18 units of growth hormone and running 30 units of Humalog pre, intra, and post-workout. Now, you can look at a guy like Milo Sarchev, who is famous for pushing guys full of carbs, doing high-volume training, and having those guys blow up like balloons. Clearly, and we know this, that muscle growth is primarily stimulated by mechanical tension, and that's what causes myofibrillar growth. But that doesn't take into account the other stuff that's in there. And so clearly it is doing something. Clearly what Milos does with people to blow them up in the off-season has a long-term lasting effect. And you can call it what you want, but it does seem to have an effect. And I'm telling you, if you don't believe me, try it yourself sometime. So long story short, sarcoplasm is the stuff around the muscle cells, the myofibrils, whatever. Those are the muscle cells themselves, and they can get bigger through adding more strands to them, just like putting more strands on a rope to make it stronger and bigger. And hyperplasia is the growth of new muscle cells, which we can, in theory, do with enough insulin, growth hormone, and high IGF-1 production. All right, next question I got here is from Joshua Cohen. Josh asks, I know you've discussed this before, but cannabis for bodybuilding, yay or nay? What about other substances to relax other than alcohol? Net positive for most, as long as you can control appetite and being a lazy piece of shit. I will tell you this, that not most, but quite a few top bodybuilders are potheads. William Bonac was high as a motherfucker at the Detroit Pro this year. I've heard people say he doesn't smoke. I know a motherfucker that smokes weed when I see it. That guy's eyes look like they were cut open with slits. He looked happier than a pig in mud up there. Guy was just having a great time. Good for him. I like to dabble with some THC once in a while. I used to smoke quite a bit when I was younger. Don't really do it that much anymore other than at night to relax and to get sleep. I think as long as you're not getting blazed all day long, my issue with THC is not so much that it has a negative impact on bodybuilding. It has a negative impact on my productivity with work. If I'm high all fucking day long, I don't get my work done. I'm just sitting here staring at the wall or playing video games or eating Doritos. It also makes it really hard to control your appetite sometimes. You get the munchies and starts, seems like a good idea to dial up Domino's Pizza at 9 o'clock at night and get a large pizza, Meat Lover's Pizza, and eat that and house that, and then wake up and look like a bloated piece of shit the next morning. So, that is also an issue with it. But if you can control your appetite, like you said, don't be a fat piece of shit. If you can use it to relax at night, I honestly think, the older I get, I've been terrible about prioritizing sleep. And now that I'm actively monitoring my glucose with a glucose meter, I don't know if you can see this guy here, I can definitely see how sleep affects my glucose levels. When I get a shit night's sleep, my glucose levels are up. I would rather a guy get a good night's sleep by using some gummies or hitting the vape a little bit than not get a good night's sleep. And I think when you get deep on contest prep, that sometimes it is necessary. I do use CBN and some THC gummies when I get towards the end of contest prep to relax and get some sleep. I think that is helpful and productive. I'd rather do that than not. But long story short, if you I look at it as a tool. I wouldn't use it as a crutch. If you have a hard time relaxing at the end of the day and getting some sleep, I think that's the way you can use it. I would say this, it's way better than drinking fucking alcohol. I do like to have a good cocktail once in a blue moon. I like a nice whiskey. I do enjoy a nice whiskey now and then, or a nice craft brew, or even a cider. But I'm talking about I have one every couple months. I will go to dinner with my partner. I will drink a mixed drink or have a cider or a craft brew, and that's it. I won't drink again for a couple months. On vacation, maybe a pina colada, make my A1C go through the roof, that kind of thing. Have to take Humalog to deal with it. That's kind of stupid thing. But anyway, I would take weed over alcohol or any other hard drug any other day. And if you're just using it as a tool to help you sleep, I think that's okay. All right, last question here is from username, my favorite username. Username, I don't know if you guys can hear this. It's my dog snoring in the background. So if you hear snoring, that's what it is. It's my mastiff snoring. Username asks, thinking I might have missed it, but what are your thoughts on testing Ester? Useful as a pre-workout for a few times a week or not? I've tried it before. I mean, it's been years. It will give you a kick in the pants pre-workout. I don't know that it adds a whole lot of anything. Really, if you just want something to get you through your workout, you need a little extra kick. I want to take something that's actually going to have an impact on hypertrophy. I don't know that the Testo Ester really does. Also, it just, the water retention and other issues that come with it. I would take a couple Anavar tabs, 50 milligrams, 2 to 3 hours pre-workout. If you have an oral suspension, you could do that sublingually and take it sooner or whatever. But the peak Anavar peaks about 3 hours after you take it orally, somewhere around that range. I don't quote me on that exact number, but that's what I recall. That's a ballpark. But I would take 50 milligrams of Anavar and then just drink a fucking pre-workout or have a cup of coffee. That should get your ass going when you're in the gym if you need something to get you going. If you want a crazy pump, I'm not suggesting you do this, but I like to take a little bit of Humalog and eat some extra carbs. That works too. That's just my my strategy. I'm a dummy bodybuilder. Don't do what I do. But really, Anavar and, a pre-workout, your favorite pre-workout drink. I don't really do pre-workouts. I have. Justin gave me some of his pre-workout like years ago, and I think I have a couple containers of it still sitting in my closet that I haven't used. I've used them once or twice. They just amp me up too much. I'm super sensitive to caffeine. So usually what I'll do is I'll have a cup of coffee in the morning, and I really like these Ghost energy drinks. I'll have one of those pre-workout. Right now I'm just doing TRT, but I'll drink my Ghost energy while I'm eating my pre-workout meal, and I'm ready to go when I get to the gym. That's enough for me. There were no pre-workouts when I was younger. We didn't have anything to amp us up for a workout other than just good old-fashioned testosterone-laden aggression and heavy metal music. That's another thing. Music. I like music for getting me aggressive. If you find a good metal album to listen to and you get that going while you're in the car and you start thinking about your lifts, that can get you going too. So a lot of it's up here. Anyway, folks, that's all I got for you on this one. I hope you found this Q&A helpful. If you want to get your questions on the next Q&A, go sign up for the Anabolic Bodybuilding team member site at school. I think you'll like it. It's only $30 a month. It's not that expensive. And I personally answer questions over there. All right, folks, I appreciate each and every one of you. You are awesome. Go out and kick ass, seize the day, and be the best you can be. Take care. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.